It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. 5 dead in shootings in and around a migrant camp near Dunkirk. The suspect then hands himself in to police. Fresh questions for Prince Andrew over his links to an alleged Chinese spy, as photos seen by Sky News show the man meeting 2 prime ministers. Sky News investigates a Russian airbase in Syria, witnessing soldiers pulling back their military hardware. From professional footballer to president, Georgia's new leader who once played for Manchester City. The billionaire founder of fashion chain Mango dies in a mountain accident, falling off a 150-metre cliff while hiking in Spain. Spying smart gadgets, how your air fryer might be earwigging. A new warning for consumers. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's in the press preview from 10:30. Hello, a very good evening, and we start with breaking news. 5 people have died in shooting incidents in northern France, one at a migrant camp. A warning that the following footage shows the aftermath of one of the shootings, including dead bodies. Well, 2 of the victims were migrants killed at the Lune Plage camp near Dunkirk, and 2 further victims are understood to have been security personnel. The 2 migrants were Kurds who attempted to cross the channel today and were rescued by French authorities. A 22-year-old man, understood to be a French national, handed himself into a nearby police station and admitted carrying out another fatal shooting. Let's cross to our Europe correspondent, Adam Parsons, who's in Mardyk near Dunkirk. Adam, what's the latest?
Yeah, an absolutely extraordinary series of events that started this afternoon with that shooting in a town a little way from the coast of a 29-year-old businessman, apparently shot in front of members of his family by this Frenchman, this 22-year-old, who then drove up to here, to this camp, stopped in his green vehicle, got out with what is described as a shotgun and fired what we were told was around 15 bullets, killing 2 people. Sky News has spoken to one of the people who was there when that shooting happened, who told us that the 2 people killed were called Hamid and Hadi, both of them 25 years old. They were Kurds who, one of them had sold his house to come here, who had attempted to cross the channel that day and had been rescued right in the middle of the channel, having fallen into the water, and had returned to this camp. Now, let me tell you, at the moment, you can see the emergency services are there. What you may not be able to see is that they've just brought in 2 private ambulances, we understand, to take the bodies of these migrants away to the mortuary. Now, clearly the police investigating what on earth happened here, but also subsequently this gunman killing two people described as security personnel. It's not clear at the moment whether they were police officers or potentially security guards from the nearby port, and then taking himself to a police station and handing himself in. We don't know why this person carried out these attacks, what motivated them, whether there was any link between the killing of the first person, the killing of the 2 migrants here, or the security personnel. The person, the witness that we spoke to, described an extraordinary and harrowing succession of events when, having returned from this incredibly perilous sea journey to this camp, he said they were soaked to the skin, that they just collected some new clothes, saw this car come to a halt and saw the man come out with a shotgun. They thought he was going to fire warning shots into the air to try to scare them. Instead, he fired rounds towards them. We were told that one of these men was shot in the head. The other one received wounds. We're not clear where they were, but both of them died on the ground where they were standing. One other person appears to have had some rather superficial wounds, but doesn't seem as if anyone else was seriously wounded. It would appear that this man, this 22-year-old Frenchman, described by our eyewitness as white and wearing glasses, had other firearms in the car when he drove off. We don't know at what point he then encountered these security personnel. But this comes against the background of two things. These camps are, from experience, volatile and violent places, but there is no suggestion at the moment that these migrants had any role at all in this attack other than being victims. The other background to this is that even though at this time of year, when it is cold, when the weather is unpredictable, there used to be a significant lull in the number of people trying to cross the channel. At this time of this year and maybe previous year, the numbers have remained high. And over the past 3 or 4 days, when the channel has been a little calmer, we've seen a great influx of people trying to get from here over to Britain. Just yesterday, there was a big rescue with around 100 people being brought back to shore. And this boat, these migrants on today, started off with 85 people leaving shore. About 50 of those were rescued, and the remaining 35, including the 2 subsequent victims and the 2 people they were travelling with, got to the centre and then said that the boat simply sank. They were in the water when they were rescued. Matin, the man that we spoke to who described this, said to us that he had seen death twice, once in the water and then once again here. He described seeing these 2 people who he got to know over the past month in this camp die in front of him. And he said that what he saw was the angel of death appearing in front of his eyes. It is a devastating account of what at the moment appears to be a completely dreadful attack carried out by this 22-year-old Frenchman in 3 locations, leaving 5 people dead.
Very distressing. Adam, thank you. That's our Europe correspondent in northern France. Meanwhile, the Home Secretary visited Rome today for bilateral talks on people smuggling and illegal migration. She met with her Italian counterpart and discussed how to address illegal migration at source. Nearly 300 people made the journey across the Channel yesterday, and more than 34,500 people have crossed so far this year, a 19% increase on 2023. Sky's political correspondent Serena Barker-Singh reports.
Ministro dell'Interno del Regno Unito, Yvette Cooper.
The Home Secretary is speaking at a political festival in Italy today. The focus, immigration, and a chance for the government to broker immigration deals across Europe.
Well, we need to restore order and control both to our border security and also to the asylum system. That's why I'm in Italy talking to the Interior Minister about stronger cooperation against the criminal smuggler gangs, but why we're also announcing the much stronger enforcement that we've been taking in the UK.
Enforcement against this. Under the Conservatives, Dover became the poster seat for the immigration debate, and last week it recorded the highest number of people arriving here on a single day in December. The government say they've removed nearly 13,500 people from the UK since the general election and are on track to deliver the highest number of returns for 5 years. Over 2,000 foreign criminals were also removed since July, an increase of 20% compared to last year. They've also announced £8 million for new technology and £5 million for body-worn cameras to help them capture evidence like this, illegal working raids. But the Conservatives say it's just a continuation of their work.
These aren't good returns because they're not returning the people who arrive in the country illegally. These are people who were caught on, illegal working raids, which is what we brought in, might I add, when we were in office. We brought that forward. We brought forward the Albania deal. That means that people can be sent back to Albania when they've come from Albania. This is just carrying on what we were doing.
Do you think you're now influencing how other political parties are speaking about this issue?
I think they are beginning to realise that given the increase in our poll rating to the mid-20s, and we're now sometimes polling ahead of the Tories, sometimes ahead of Labour, if they're not listening and if they're not looking at why we're having success, then frankly, they are being rather tin-ear.
Do you think this is becoming more of a political football and actually just a way to get votes?
Both are true. Without question, voters of all political parties, I think, are furious.
We want it to be a positive relationship from outside the EU. We can be partners and work together. That is what we should be doing.
Shared objectives with right-wing political parties at home and abroad may not only be an unlikely outcome for Labour, but uncomfortable for some within the left-wing camp as well. Serena Barker-Singh, Sky News.
The alleged Chinese spy who became a close confidant of Prince Andrew met two prime ministers, according to photos seen by Sky News. The businessman has been pictured alongside David Cameron and Theresa May. There's no suggestion either of them were aware of his reported links to the Chinese state, and it's not known when the pictures were taken. Well, Prince Andrew is no stranger to controversy, and his current troubles only appear to be intensifying tonight. Sky's Thomas Moore reports.
The alleged Chinese spy found his way to the heart of the British establishment, meeting not just one, but two former prime ministers, according to photographic evidence seen by Sky News. When exactly the businessman, who can't be identified for legal reasons, posed with David Cameron and Theresa May is unclear. Sources close to Lord Cameron said he met thousands of people at hundreds of events during his time as Tory leader. A spokesperson for Baroness May said she had no recollection of any meeting. But the businessman's ties to Prince Andrew were already under close scrutiny, invited to his birthday party and royal residences, but now banned from the UK on national security grounds.
This is what China does, and it's very good at it indeed. Grey zone warfare, all part of a bigger geopolitical game of power, if you like, with the West, including Britain. It seeks opportunities, it seeks vulnerabilities in our society to gain privileged access at the very, very highest levels, including the royal family.
Court documents refer to the alleged spy as H6. He's aged 50 and until the COVID pandemic spent 1 or 2 weeks a month in the UK. Security services believed he had links with the United Front Work Department, an arm of the Chinese state. And the documents say his relationship with the Duke of York had a covert and clandestine element. Although Prince Andrew wouldn't have access to state secrets, his past role as a prominent royal and trade envoy meant he would have been well connected to politicians, diplomats, business executives and military figures.
Our security and intelligence agencies are continually vigilant for any threat to UK national security, whether that be around foreign influence, whether it be around espionage, whether it be around any security threat. And so, of course, we won't hesitate to take action.
The national security risk posed by H6 wasn't known at the time that he was invited to functions at the royal residences. Prince Andrew's office said that he ceased all contact with the businessman as soon as he received government advice.
But questions are now being asked about the prince's business dealings, particularly now he has no royal allowance to pay for his home on the Windsor estate. And this biographer told Sky News he's not getting any answers.
This stuff has vanished. The Foreign Office claim not to know anything about it. The Department of Business and Trade know nothing. I've put in, I think, probably over 100 requests now. And I'm still really not much further forward in terms of, I asked for specific trips that he made on specific times. I asked for general papers about particular departments. Each time it's either too wide and therefore there's a cost compliance element, or it's too narrow and they have no information. And so we're playing with semantics the whole time. It's like playing whack-a-mole.
The Chinese embassy dismissed the espionage claim as a baseless spy story, and the government said information relating to the Duke had been withheld in accordance with all legal requirements. Buckingham Palace declined to comment, saying he's no longer a working royal. But this now goes far beyond Prince Andrew. If the man accused of spying for China can meet former prime ministers, who else has he had access to? Thomas Moore, Sky News.
US Secretary of State Antony Blinken says Washington has had direct contact with the Syrian rebel group that ousted Bashar al-Assad. It's been a week since Assad's brutal regime was toppled, and in the aftermath, Russia has pulled its forces back from the front lines in northern Syria, but says it's not leaving its two main military bases. One of those is the Hmeimim Air Base in Syria's coastal Latakia province, from where our chief correspondent Stuart Ramsey reports, and has seen evidence of Russian troops pulling back their military hardware.
A Russian helicopter gunship circles above its base near Latakia on the Mediterranean coast in Syria. enormous transporter planes manoeuvre around the airstrip, preparing perhaps to fly equipment out of Syria. The Syrian checkpoint in front of the base is now deserted. Past the Russian flag, a picture of President Putin still hangs, alone. The image of Bashar al-Assad is conspicuously absent. Beyond the gates, Russian soldiers stand guard. They're awaiting the arrival of another convoy. It trundles along the narrow roads towards the base. This has been going on for a few days now. The soldiers are pulling back their armoured vehicles, troop carriers and supply trucks from bases across Syria. Some are marked with a Z, synonymous, of course, with the war in Ukraine. But this is a war that is now over. The drawdown is part of discussions about their future presence in the country that's taking place between Moscow and the new government here.
Well, the Russian forces have basically propped up the Assad regime since 2015, and of course that regime has now fallen. It's quite clear they're withdrawing from their bases and they're coming back to this one, which is a transport hub.
The entrance to the airport that shares the base is now guarded by HTS fighters as they wait for higher-ups to issue orders.
The location of this airport is very important, and we've received orders to be here.
Have you been speaking to the Russians at all, or have you heard from them, or are you staying outside and they're inside?
As soldiers, we don't have any contact with them, but there might be coordination between them and the country's military council.
The villagers around the base have made a good living from the Russian soldiers. The shop names and chemists are written in Russian. Now, rebel fighters are in town. The Russian military vehicles make their way along the Mediterranean coast past destroyed or abandoned Syrian army vehicles. HTS soldiers with low loaders are now collecting abandoned tanks. They're rebuilding the new Syrian army. The changes taking place in Syria this week are quite something to see.
Well, the sheer number of tanks that we've been driving past and military vehicles is remarkable. The soldiers are telling us that they're going to refurbish them, but they're not damaged. They've just got out of oil or batteries have run flat. So these have all just been abandoned. It literally has gone on for mile after mile.
The regime has gone. Its main supporters are withdrawing from the countryside. It feels like a chapter in this Syrian saga is ending, but the story is far from over. Stuart Ramsey, Sky News, Latakia.
And our international correspondent Alex Rossi has more on the diplomatic fallout from events in Syria.
Well, the atmosphere across Syria is still celebratory. People are euphoric. We saw people taking to the streets, not really still believing that Assad had left the country after 13 years of brutal civil war, where so many people lost so much. But of course, the attention now is being turned towards how to turn Syria into a normal country, and that won't be particularly easy. We're seeing that now on the diplomatic front. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has been meeting Arab foreign ministers in Aqaba in Jordan. He's also been through Baghdad, in Iraq, Ankara in Turkey, and the focus now is really kind of trying to reach out to the different groups involved, particularly HTS, the main opposition group behind the push on Damascus, to try and nudge them in the direction that will have an inclusive constitution to accommodate all the different groups in Syria and avoid many of the mistakes of the past. We heard from the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, earlier. This is what he had to say.
Yes, we've been in contact with HTS and with other parties. We have impressed upon everyone we've been in contact with the importance of helping find Austin Tice and bringing him home. And we've also shared the principles that I just laid out for our ongoing support, principles, again, that have now been adopted by countries throughout the region and well beyond. And we've communicated those. That's direct contact, yes.
The billionaire founder of the fashion chain Mango has died in an accident in Spain. 71-year-old Isaac Andic slipped and fell from a 150-metre cliff while hiking with family in mountains near Barcelona. He founded Mango in 1984 and it now has stores in more than 100 countries. The company's chief executive called Mr. Andic an example to us all, while Spain's Prime Minister paid tribute to his hard work and business vision. Sky's Saba Chowdhury is here with me. Saba, this is desperately sad, this, isn't it?
Indeed, Isaac Andic died today in a tragic accident while hiking with his family in the mountains near Barcelona. Mr. Andic was 71 years old. We know that he was worth around £3.5 billion, born in Turkey, but best known for establishing a well-known Spanish company, the popular high street brand Mango, which was popularised here in the UK after Kate Moss modelled for the company back in 2011. There are now around 40 stores in the UK and stores around 100 countries. Now, tonight, Mango's chief executive, Tony Ruiz, has paid tribute to his boss, saying that Mr. Andic's departure leaves a huge void. Spain's Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, has also said that it was Mr. Andic's hard work and business vision that transformed the Spanish brand into a global fashion leader. So, tributes tonight coming in for Isaac Andic, the founder of Mango, who tragically died aged 71.
Saba, thank you. Now, a former Premier League footballer has become the new president of Georgia. Despite continuous protests amid claims of Russian interference in October's parliamentary elections, Mikhail Kavalashvili was today appointed to the role. Well, he played for clubs including Manchester City in the 1990s. He also earned 46 caps for Georgia. He entered politics in 2016, becoming a member of parliament for the pro-Russia Georgian Dream Party. In 2022, he co-founded a group called People's Power, aligned with Georgian Dream and known for its anti-Western stance. Last month, he emerged as the sole nominee for the presidency. And today he was formally elected, the first president to be chosen by parliamentary vote since the rules changed in 2017. Journalist Tornik Mandaria has more from Tbilisi.
British viewers might know him as he played briefly in the 1990s for the Manchester City. But he has joined Georgian politics back in 2016 with the current ruling party, Georgian Dream, which is founded by a billionaire oligarch, Bidzina Ioanishvili. And ever since then, he has become one of the most Eurosceptic hardliner, anti-Western hardliner. His rhetoric is in sync with the Kremlin's rhetoric. So he is believed to be kind of sharing these ideas. We don't know exactly if he's connected in any way with Mr. Putin in any ways directly, but definitely there is this sense of understanding that his rhetoric, his understanding of the world, his understanding of the positioning of this country, according to the polls, majority, over 80% of Georgians want to join the European Union, but the current government and Mr. Kavalashvili himself have been criticizing this idea and moving away from this European path. You know that Georgia is a candidate country for the membership of the European Union, but unfortunately, the Georgian government has announced the suspension of the negotiations until 2028. But obviously, people don't believe that this is going to be just temporary. There are big nightly protests right now after this announcement, this decision of the ruling party to suspend the negotiations. We've been seeing tens of thousands of people every day, every night, coming to the streets and trying to get their voices across and to reach the government, to reach the ruling party, and tell them to bring the country back to the democratic development.
There have been celebrations on the streets of South Korea after the country's parliament voted to impeach the president over his botched attempt to impose martial law. President Yoon vowed to never give up, despite now being suspended from official duties as part of the impeachment process. A warning, this report from our Asia correspondent, Nicole Johnston, has some flash photography.
In the end, protesters got what they wanted. A motion to impeach President Yoon Suk-yeol has been passed by Parliament, and people are celebrating. Earlier, South Korean lawmakers had voted on their country's future. A handful of President Yoon's own party members crossed the floor to vote against him.
I hereby declare the impeachment motion against President Yoon has been passed.
Yoon's powers have been handed to the Prime Minister. Han Duck-soo is acting president. And yet Yoon is still defiant, accusing North Korean elements of infiltrating the government.
저는 지금 잠시 멈춰 서지만
I may pause for a moment now, but the journey toward the future, which I have walked with the people over the past 2.5 years, must never come to a halt. I will never give up.
11 days ago, President Yoon plunged South Korea into the type of political crisis it had not experienced for decades. He declared martial law, sent soldiers onto the streets and special forces into the parliament. Lawmakers held them off long enough to vote the martial law down. Yoon was forced to cancel it.
I have accepted the decision made by the National Assembly.
But the damage was done. Around the world, people looked on in shock at what was happening.
No one really understands at this point what he is thinking, why he's doubling down, and who his supporters are. The latest polls show that he has 11% support across the country.
A constitutional court now has 6 months to rule on impeaching the president. So it's not over yet. But South Koreans, their democracy shaken to the core, have won another major round against their embattled president. Nicole Johnston, Sky News.
Now, smart gadgets, almost all of us have them, but what are they learning about us? From air fryers to vacuum cleaners and all tech in between. The Information Commissioner's office is warning our devices are collecting too much information. Sky's Ashna Hurinag has more.
You don't expect your air-fried chips to come with a side of surveillance, but research has found they might.
Do I need umbrella for tomorrow in London?
From tracking locations to listening to conversations to knowing your gender and date of birth, our devices, in some cases, are acutely smart.
People are not aware that smartphone voice recognition or air fryer voice recognition will gather everything that's going on in the background in the house. So, if your air fryer knows more about your morning routine and your house routine than your family, then I think we have to start looking at privacy a lot stricter.
Research by consumer group Which has found 2 brands were sending personal data to China, despite it being flagged in the privacy notice. The advice to always read the small print.
The companies which have a lot of reputation to lose, like Amazon or Google, they try to provide the information about terms and conditions in a reasonably large print. But it's the smaller manufacturers and the smaller brands that often can't afford translation. They might not even provide it for wrong reasons. They just might not be able to afford.
Among the devices with concerns were Chinese-manufactured air fryers, smartwatches, speakers and TVs. The data watchdog is calling out what it calls uncontrolled data collection. Manufacturers will get new transparency guidelines next spring.
We're going to be asking manufacturers to focus on these considerations around security, around transparency, around giving people control, about making sure their rights are respected. And we are really looking for the industry to make a step change now in terms of how it treats consumers in this area.
Consumer experts are concerned with how enforceable the guidelines will be for manufacturers based outside the UK. But if smart devices are here to stay, we need to trust how they work.
It looks like there will be cloudy skies.
Ashna Harinag, Sky News.
OK, time now for the sport. Here's Alice.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
I think it's a human quality that some people are destined with their own determination.
I think that the player, compared to me, I think that they have much more responsibility.
I do think there's a responsibility within the game to prepare the lads for how hard it's going to be.
I started my investigation into academy football by finding out how the game's top managers get the best out of the young players. But only 9% of our academy players will ever play a professional game. Coming up in this episode, we find out how the best become the best.
You don't just get it handed to you, you're aware.
There has to be a fallback.
Chelsea Academy, that's all I've known.
Mentally, I think I've always been quite strong.
In the history of the game, almost 1,300 people have had the ultimate honour of wearing an England shirt. They climbed the mountain, made it to the very top. So what does that journey look like? The journey to become an elite footballer?
It's just what I love doing. It's the only thing that I loved growing up. There was no alternative for me.
You got the big break at the age of 6.
Yeah.
It's an extraordinary story.
It was just like a half-term camp that the academy was doing. They'd sent invites to a few schools in the community, and luckily it was one of my schools was one of them. As you can imagine, every hand in the class went up. So the only way to do it was to pick names out of a hat. Luckily my name got pulled out.
What was it like being in the Liverpool Academy?
You get elite coaching, elite advice, elite nutrition, and it prepares you for going and being elite in a senior game. I think it teaches you a lot off the pitch as well rather than on. I think it instills, the discipline, the sacrifice, the hard work, everything that you need to go and achieve what you want. You don't just get it handed to you, you gotta work and earn it every single day. It's a level of competitiveness against some of your closest friends and the closest people that you have to kind of outwork them and be better than them, because you need to fight for your next contract and make it to the next step. I necessarily think that's a really good thing, because whether you do or don't make it, you're prepared for life itself, because you know what it takes, and you know that even to have the smallest chance, which is what we all have, the tiniest little chance to ever make it, you have to fight day in, day out. You've got more chance winning the lottery than making it as a professional footballer.
What was the pressure like for you, making that step up so young from the academy football to the first team?
There's nothing like it. The best under-21s game you can ever play in won't ever come close to a first-team training session. I was scared of making mistakes in simple passing drills, so that the pressure kind of rolled.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
And that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we're going to take a first look at tomorrow's papers. It's the press preview, of course, and tonight I'm joined by the political commentator Benedict Spence and journalist and author Christina Patterson. And among the stories that we're going to be discussing, this on the front of the Sunday Times. The headline they've gone with: photos raise urgent questions about how deeply alleged agent penetrated establishment. We'll be back in a couple of minutes.
We've come to one of Moscow's Cold War bunkers. It was built as a top-secret command centre.
Being here really feels like you're stepping back in time.
I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
A show of military might and menace.
Courage, bravery and sacrifice will win the day.
It's a new subject. They'll learn about combat drones and some how to handle a Kalashnikov.
The Kremlin continues to put forward its own version of events, both present and past.
There's no mention of the fact that Russia invaded its neighbour. That's rewriting history, isn't it?
Now we have to read it carefully.
Vladimir Putin put forward his plan for a ceasefire in Ukraine, telling Kiev, pull out of your eastern territories and the war will end. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Vladimir Putin is already the Kremlin's longest-serving leader since Stalin. The question is, what will a fifth Putin term mean for Russia and the world?
Why do you support Vladimir Putin, Mr. Segal?
I can't answer questions that stupid.
I've watched Vladimir Putin attempt to create a new world order. The St. Petersburg Economic Forum was the backdrop to Vladimir Putin's latest verbal volley that Russia could send missiles to other nations to target the West. Ambassador, I wonder, shall we have a quick word for Sky News? Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine?
Swedish media, oh my God, you're not afraid of being here.
American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display. Russia says Evan Gershkovich was caught red-handed, but has never produced any evidence to back that up. Sky News. Get the full story first.
The most significant day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
You want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Hello again. So it's time for the press preview. We're going to check out tomorrow's front pages as they come into us here at Sky. We'll see what's making the headlines tonight with the political commentator Benedict Spence and the journalist and author Christina Patterson. So nice to see you both again. We will chat in a moment after we've had a look at some of those front pages for you, beginning with the Sunday Times, leading with Prince Andrew over his links to an alleged Chinese spy. Meanwhile, on the front of the Telegraph, claims a Chinese interpreter who worked for the Foreign Office also ran a website pushing China's agenda. Here's tomorrow's Observer, critical of Labour's new plan to build 1.5 million new homes. On the front of the Express, Boris Johnson says Keir Starmer's government must be stopped from tying itself to Brussels again in a major trade deal with Europe. While the PM is accused of betraying the 2016 Brexit vote. That's on the front of the Mail on Sunday. A special investigation by the Mirror suggests the amount of women sleeping rough in the UK is double what the government figures suggest. On the front of the Sun, TV star Eamonn Holmes has told friends he wants to marry his girlfriend after his divorce to TV presenter Ruth Langsford is finalised. And the front of the Daily Star features Holmes Under the Hammer presenter Martin Roberts talking about his encounter with a spooky property. And don't forget, you just need to scan that QR code with your phone. You can check out tomorrow's front papers while you watch us discussing them. And to do that, I'm joined tonight by Benedict Spence and Christina Patterson. Right, why don't we start with the Sunday Times, Christina? They have got a very interesting take, haven't they, on the latest problems facing Prince Andrew. They say that the alleged Chinese spy met Theresa May and David Cameron.
Yeah. I mean, it does raise the question, is Andrew the most stupid man in the United Kingdom? And I have to say that it's a very strong argument that he is. Yes, it sounds as if this Chinese man who is currently referred to as H6 for legal reasons, but there is a sense that his real name will be released fairly imminently, possibly under a parliamentary privilege this week. There are photographs in a documentary, apparently. There are photographs that he displays in his office of meetings with David Cameron and Theresa May. What isn't clear is whether either of them were Prime Minister at the time. But either way, clearly there was a very deliberate process of capturing of the elite. I think there's a phrase for it, like elite capture. And Prince Andrew was one of the people targeted. Whether he actually qualifies as elite is another matter. But he appears to have allowed this person to ingratiate himself. And there is mention by Dominic Hampshire, an advisor to Andrew, who apparently told this Chinese man that he sat at the very top of a tree of Andrew's confidence. I mean, if you thought Epstein was bad, it's just astonishing, absolutely astonishing, that a country that very clearly has ill intentions towards us in all kinds of ways, that people should be allowed to get so near to the establishment. And Prince Andrew's judgment is just breathtakingly bad.
OK, well, I mean, he says that he severed ties with this Chinese businessman as soon as he was warned. He said nothing of a sensitive nature was ever discussed. He met through official channels. And looking at these photographs, you could say that Theresa May and David Cameron also met him through official channels.
Yes, it's entirely possible that nothing untoward has happened, although it's hardly likely that they would turn around and say something official may or may not have been leaked. Whoops. In some ways, it's almost reassuring that we're being targeted by the world's second biggest power for espionage. It shows that in some capacity they still think that we're worth spying on. I think that we have to think about this in terms of actually the pros and cons of the fact that our democracy is pretty open, our media ecosystem is pretty open, and we are very open to other nations around the world, including countries like China, that are not, in fact, the most friendly towards us, or have been for a very long time, for various different political and economic reasons. This is you take the rough with the smooth, you open yourself up more, in some ways, to this form of espionage. It is worth pointing out that this is not just one way. We are obviously engaged in espionage against other countries, and the fact that we're not hearing very much about it rather suggests that we're quite good at it, because they're not being found out, otherwise that this would be front-page news as well. But I think also we're getting to a stage now when it comes to international espionage where it's getting a lot harder actually to keep secrets from people. I mean, all of our messages, all of our communications, also means royals, government officials, it means members of the security services, are all on devices that can be hacked by other intelligence services and likely already have been. It's very difficult to hide anything. It doesn't matter if you're the CIA trying to hide from the Chinese or the Russians or vice versa. Actually, by and large, a lot of this stuff is out in the open. It's much more, I think, to do with influence in politics rather than getting information out of people. How much influence can you actually wield over, say, a political party? Now, Prince Andrew, I think, as Christina alluded to, that's slightly up in the air, actually, as to how much influence he wields these days. David Cameron, Theresa May, even if we're talking about them as, in the years after being Prime Minister, long since, they still, I think, carry a lot of sway, certainly within their parties. David Cameron was able to walk back into government and was very highly respected for the job that he did. As you say, they would say that this is just part and parcel of the deal. Former Prime Ministers, sitting Prime Ministers, they have to meet lots of people. But that is where I think the question has to be asked, actually. How deep are foreign intelligence agencies able to penetrate not so much accruing information, but getting influence over politicians and perhaps even influencing policy or decisions? And I think beyond just, business people, you've also got to look at things like think tanks. You've also got to look to the media, because they won't just be going down one route. They'll be looking for lots of different avenues.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning what Theresa May and Lord Cameron both say. A spokesperson for Theresa May says Baroness May and her husband are photographed at numerous events in any given year. As such, she doesn't remember when or where this particular photograph was taken, or indeed the man in question. A source for Lord Cameron, he was leader of the Conservative Party for over a decade, PM for 6 years. He met thousands of people in that time at hundreds of functions and events. We don't have any further information on this individual. All the papers seem to have a slightly different take on it. The Sunday Telegraph, Christina, is interesting. They say that a Foreign Office interpreter is accused of running a propaganda site amid what you were saying, fears of Beijing's reach.
I mean, again, it just makes the Brits sound like a slightly bumbling bunch of amateurs, really, to have not be checking out. I mean, you know, presumably they thought, well, we don't speak Mandarin or whatever language this blog was written in, but apparently this interpreter was also writing a blog, had a website that has been identified by Microsoft as part of a veiled global network of Chinese Communist Party news websites. Well, clearly someone who is actively promoting the Chinese Communist Party should arguably not be working as an interpreter for the Foreign Office. So it just sounds like amateur hour to me, and that is used as an example, I suppose, of carelessness, really. And we don't know exactly how this guy, this spy, as yet unnamed, managed to infiltrate circles that included Theresa May or David Cameron, or indeed Prince Andrew. But I very much doubt that we are have similar levels of access in China, even though, of course, we will have espionage operations, because they are just much, much tougher about these things. And I think there has been. And of course, it's partly about vested interests, this feeling. George Osborne was very pro-China and wanted to build trade links. And I think poor Keir Starmer, as always, is over a barrel because of Brexit, which he can't say has been a disaster, though clearly it has. So he's also keen to forge trade links. And how you forge trade links while also saying, oh, by the way, the Uyghur, you know, bit of a problem there or whatever, I don't know. And they don't know either. But I think clearly we haven't been careful enough, and it's a mess.
OK, we're going to move on just briefly because we need to take a break shortly. Back to the front of the Sunday Times. I mean, what a week it's been in Syria, and the footage and the coverage coming out of that country, unbelievable. Their take is that it'll be bigger than Nuremberg, the hidden archive of Assad's atrocities.
Yeah, the sheer scale of the investigation that's going to be gone into, although perhaps that's also because the Nazis went through a very meticulous phase of burning absolutely everything. So there will be a lot more, because actually the Assad regime, as awful as it is, was not quite as effective on that front. That's partly why it needed to be propped up by two other regimes to stay in power. But there's no question it is an appalling situation that is being revealed. Although we say revealed, this has been a fairly open secret for some time, actually, that what's been going on in Syria is catastrophic, appalling human rights abuses. People detained, disappeared, murdered, tortured for almost any sort of pretext, really, be it, you know, something you've said, your ethnicity, where you happen to live, or somebody just didn't like the look of you. We're discovering that now it's being sort of laid bare, the stuff that we all secretly knew, but now is unavoidable. And I think it does just reinforce the wickedness, actually, of the situation, that once upon a time, a decade ago, this was a big story, and then it just sort of went away, and people thought, oh, well, the news cycle moves on, partly because the United States said, well, this has nothing to do with us, and in the UK, we don't really have the power to intervene on an individual level anyway. But other wars took over, they took precedence. But this never stopped happening. You know, the scale that it was happening on, it never went away. And the people of Syria have been left far too long. And whilst I do understand the fears about liberal interventionism in the Middle East and the disasters that can bring, I do really feel that the fact that we're all sort of waking up to this now and going, oh, good Lord, Syria, that's still a thing? I had no idea that it was still a thing, is really telling, actually, of the sort of the priorities. And one thing I would say is, a strong and secure and prosperous Syria is a vital part of European security interests, not just Middle Eastern. It's vital to Europe as well, and that has to be established going forward.
OK, we are going to have to go to a break, Christina. We'll get your thoughts a little later on the situation in Syria. Coming up after the break, why Labour's being accused of building a new generation of slum homes. Don't go away.
Derby Day in Manchester. There is nothing quite like it. Blue and red lock horns. Sports' most compelling soap opera.
The Manchester Derby on USA.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, DC.
We'd been warned that we would meet people in the lowest moment of their lives.
Their story is one of fundamental American failure. Well, a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club, but I have to say there are more media here than there are supporters.
We love Trump!
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too. This is just the audience that Joe Biden wanted.
Is this the moment to reform gun laws?
You know, it's easy to go to politics.
But it's important. It's at the heart of the issue.
For all the talk of a toned-down, humbled Trump, yes, maybe there was just a little less rhetoric, a little less divisiveness, but in the end it was the same rhythm, the same speech, the same man.
All them people that died in Russia and Ukraine, they'd still be alive today if Donald Trump was the president.
If it was my wish, have a businessman that's strong like Trump, but maybe just doesn't say as much, you know?
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What we've been allowed to see over here is a humanitarian corridor. Free wherever you get your news. A young American medical student is making remarkable things happen.
I've seen a lot of difficult things, and honestly, it breaks my heart. These children don't deserve that.
I don't think there's a single Arab I know who isn't seriously disturbed by what's going on.
And so they gathered for this wonder of nature.
I'm very excited right now.
This is an extraordinary moment beyond anything I could have expected. Sky News, get the full story first.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
This conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle. Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
They want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Welcome back. Part two of the press preview. Benedict and Christina still with us. Let's look at the front page of The Observer, Christina. Tell me about this. The PM condemned for allowing a new wave of slum housing.
Yes, it's a very dramatic headline for something that definitely hasn't happened yet and probably won't. But hey, we all need to have attention-seeking headlines. Of course, this relates to Keir Starmer's promise to build 1.5 million homes in the course of this parliament, which is a very big ambition and will be very difficult to achieve. And it'll be very difficult to achieve, not least because of NIMBYism and also because of sclerotic processes in relation to planning, getting permission for planning and so on. But this actually relates to office blocks becoming residential housing. And this story seems to be based around someone called Hugh Ellis, who's a policy director at the Town and Country Planning Association, has noticed that Labour has not condemned the idea that the Tories introduced of turning office blocks into residential homes. And he is worried that this is going to cause suboptimal housing that's not going to be, high enough standard. All of this is very speculative. We have no idea whether that's going to happen.
Quite a good idea, doesn't it, to term it?
Well, I personally think it is a good idea. Clearly, it's got to be good enough, but I think it's very unlikely that Labour are going to be the people who build, who allow housing that is, really, really unsuitable, given that masses of people in this country are already living in pretty much slums, particularly private rental properties. So, to be honest, I think this is a bit of a story about nothing. But I don't know. What do you think?
I think that people, you mentioned that NIMBYism is one of the major problems. I often think that the quality of housing is one of the things that people often object to most of all, not just in terms of what people have to live in, but also objectively what it looks like. And the fear is, I think, that if you try try to do what are ostensibly seem like quite good measures, sort of pre-existing buildings, try to repurpose them, people get a little bit iffy about that because they feel that it's not necessarily suitable for homes. Obviously, we have a massive housing shortfall in this country, but I really do think that the government are, as Christina said, going to struggle, even if they push through these sorts of things. I just don't think they're going to meet those targets.
Interesting idea. Sunday Times, Benedict, reforms money man to link up with Musk.
So this is Nick Candy, formerly of Conservative donor, now Reform donor, who's giving lots of money to Nigel Farage, is going to supposedly have a meeting with Elon Musk to discuss funding. It's not happened yet, but of course Musk was one of the key drivers behind Donald Trump's campaign. And I think that this is something, you're going to see a lot more of this, not just in the United States, but I think in Europe, because I think, whereas once upon a time the MAGA movement sort of saw itself in quite isolationist terms, I think it now, with the expansion of China and its remit, looks at Europe as being a bit of part of the European, the US sphere, and it looks at the politics of what's happening in Europe, and it looks at the declining growth and a lot of what it considers to be quite sluggish politics, and it thinks this is an area ripe for us to basically take control of. And obviously that's of interest to people like Elon Musk because they don't like all the regulations that there are around tech and social media that the European Union obviously has come to blows with Musk in the past. So I think you're going to see, not just in the UK, also in Europe, I think you're going to see a lot more interest, if you like, from Silicon Valley donors from the United States, not just in terms of giving their money, but also their tactics to insurgent right-wing parties, or maybe even left-wing parties, if they promise to deregulate, in order to get what they want. I think that this is going to be a bit of a theme. Whether or not they actually raise the sort of money that's being talked about, this talks about 25 million to make Nigel Farage Prime Minister. I'm not entirely convinced that that's going to happen, but we wait and see. You're going to see a lot more of this sort of theme going forward, I think.
One sentence on this, Christina.
Sorry.
Elon Musk, mad, ghastly. Nick Candy, not great. I just think lots of very, very rich men are trying to determine the future of various democracies, and it feels pretty unpleasant. And Elon Musk's interference in British politics through X has been puerile and horrible, and I hope they'll go
Benedict,
away.
Christina, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional. This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.